world's biggest serial killer might never have been caught if he knew how to use a computer. Imagine a person committing serial killings who is also a friend of his victims, a well-known name in the city, and on top of that, a doctor. This astonishing story is about Dr. Harold Shipman, who did not use his clinic to save lives, but to take them. In a small town called Hyde in England, where only 30,000 people lived, he continued his serial killings for 23 years. Even after putting more than 250 people into an eternal sleep, no one suspected Dr. Harold Shipman, and perhaps they never would have if he hadn't made one small mistake. What was the reason behind these murders? Why wasn't he caught for so long? And what clue did the police find that exposed years of killings in an instant? Welcome once again to Tales of the Past. Dr. Harold Shipman used to run his clinic in a small town called Hyde, near Manchester, England. The total population here was around 30,000, out of which 3,000 were Dr. Shipman's patients. The doctor mostly targeted patients who lived alone and were very old, so that no one would suspect their deaths. Dr. Shipman would give these patients as much time as possible, even visiting their homes. He would listen to them to lighten their hearts and make them feel that even though they were alone, Dr. Shipman was always there to listen to them. Some patients trusted Dr. Shipman so much that they even gave him the keys to their homes. Because of his attitude, he became quite famous in Hyde, as people believed that he could cure elderly patients just through conversations. But behind all this, Dr. Shipman was extracting all their details: who stayed alone at what time, how much wealth and property they had, who visited their house, and where their relatives lived. Once he was satisfied with the information, he would kill his patients by giving them a medication overdose. Since these patients were already over 80 years old, their deaths did not raise any suspicion. This cycle continued for many years. Forget being caught. No one even suspected him, until he made a mistake himself. Dr. Shipman had started his career in a town called Pontefract, 70 kilometers away from Hyde, where he worked at a hospital. Then, in 1974, he left Pontefract and moved to Todmorden, where he got a position as a general practitioner at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center. During his job here, he was caught prescribing an excessive quantity of a drug called pethidine to some patients, but in reality, he was using it himself. Pethidine is actually a painkiller, but it is highly addictive. Dr. Shipman was addicted to pethidine, and he deliberately prescribed it to his patients, giving them only a little while, using the rest himself. Since the patients did not actually need this medicine, they felt good after taking it, but they didn't realize they were getting addicted. This was why Shipman's patients were attracted to him without even wanting to be. After being caught, the hospital administration fired Dr. Shipman, and his license was about to be cancelled. However, Shipman paid a fine of £600 and admitted himself to a rehabilitation center, which saved his license from being revoked. After spending a short time in the rehab center, when everyone had forgotten about him, he moved to Hyde in 1977, where he became a general practitioner at the Donnybrook Medical Center. Throughout the 1980s, he continued practicing as a GP, but he neither gave up his addiction nor missed any chance to kill elderly patients. However, the frequency of these murders increased significantly in 1993, when he opened his own clinic in Hyde and built a good reputation in the city. For several years, everything continued smoothly, and no one suspected the doctor's activities. The first suspicion arose in March 1998, when Dr. Linda Reynolds, who worked at Brook Surgery, a hospital opposite Shipman's clinic, expressed concern about the unusually high death ratio among Shipman's patients. She pointed out that despite having a small clinic, 16 of his patients had died in the past 3 months, whereas Brooks Surgery, which had 3 times more patients, reported only 14 deaths during the same period. The suspicion grew when it was discovered that all 16 of Dr. Shipman's patients had been cremated instead of buried. Most Christians bury their deceased loved ones. Only a few opt for cremation. Dr. Linda submitted a report to the Manchester coroner, highlighting these details and noting that most of Shipman's deceased patients were elderly women found dead in their homes. She pointed out that this could not be a coincidence, as in most cases, Dr. Shipman was the only one present at the time of death. She also noted that people who die from illness at home usually pass away in their beds, but Shipman's patients were found sitting upright in chairs, fully dressed. Based on this report, an investigation was launched. However, the police found no solid evidence against Dr. Shipman, and the case was closed after a month. When Shipman's patients died, he himself would sign the Form V. Form V is the certificate that the treating doctor has to sign, in which they state the cause of the patient's death. However, the issue was that Form C, which had to be signed by another doctor, was often signed by Shipman's friends or by those who did not suspect him. In this way, he would falsify information on his patients' death certificates and easily send them for cremation. Due to this process, many deaths went uninvestigated, allowing Shipman to continue his killing spree unnoticed. After the investigation was closed, Shipman killed 3 more people, but his time was running out. His last victim was Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old former mayor of Hyde. On June 24, 1998, Kathleen was found dead in her home. Dr. Shipman was the last person to see her alive. He signed the death certificate and listed old age as the cause of death. Her daughter, Angela Woodruff, who was a lawyer, became suspicious when she found her mother's will, in which Kathleen had left her house to Dr. Shipman. Dr. Shipman was very close to that family, and him receiving the house in the will did not become the basis of suspicion. Angela became suspicious when she noticed that her mother owned 2 houses, but the will mentioned only 1. This indicated that the will was written by someone who had no knowledge of the second house. Angela went to the police, and a new investigation was launched. Kathleen's body was exhumed, and an autopsy was conducted. It was revealed that her body contained high levels of diamorphine, meaning heroin. When police questioned Shipman, he claimed Kathleen was a heroin addict and had recorded this in his computerized medical journal. Dr. Shipman had recently started making entries in the computerized medical journal, but he did not know that while he had entered the date of the death, the computer automatically saves the file's last edited date. When the police checked the records, they found that Shipman had made this entry after Kathleen's death. This proof alone was not enough to make an arrest. Along with this, police found the typewriter used to forge Kathleen's will. Some characters were mismatched in Shipman's typewriter. The mismatched characters in Shipman's typewriter exactly matched those of the forged will. On September 7, 1998, Dr. Harold Shipman, a respected figure in Hyde, was arrested. As the news spread, other families came forward, suspecting Shipman had killed their loved ones too. Although they suspected him, they couldn't point finger at one of the most popular personality of the town. Police also investigated 15 more patients who were killed recently by Dr. Shipman. In all these cases, a specific pattern was observed, where the patient was given a lethal dose of diamorphine, and Dr. Shipman himself signed their death certificate, stating old age as the cause of death. He also personally recommended cremation so that all evidence would be destroyed after burning. During Shipman's inquiry, all his victims' cases were reviewed. The inquiry team investigated the documents, death certificates, and records that Shipman had handled. The families of those whose relatives were Shipman's patients were also interviewed, and their bodies were exhumed for autopsy. This process was very detailed, and during this, it was discovered that from 1975 to his arrest, Shipman had murdered 218 patients. However, due to lack of evidence, the actual number could be as high as 260. He was sentenced to 15 life sentences. He could never be released from prison. But in 2004, he hanged himself in his cell, using bedsheets. After his death, a fellow inmate revealed a shocking truth. Shipman had not only killed 218 or 206, but 508 people, which Shipman told him. The true reason behind his killings remains unknown. Was he a psychopath? Was it for money? Or was it due to his mother's death? Shipman's mother, who was a cancer patient, was given diamorphine as painkillers. Experts believe Shipman wanted to see his patients die the same way his mother did. Hope you liked the video. Make sure to leave a thumbs up. Subscribe for more.